This is the audio syncing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bastard. This is the audio syncing in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello everyone, I'm Matt from Matt's Bookshelf, speaking with Tyler from Tyler's Bookshelf. Right?
Tyler's bookshelf?
Yeah, your bookshelf is
my
literally
bookshelf,
right
yeah,
there.
yep.
Yes. But today we're talking about Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood.
Yep.
The gimmick of this video is that I have never read a Haruki Murakami book before.
Yep.
So Norwegian Wood is literally my first Haruki Murakami. But Tyler has a master's degree in Murakonomics.
Yeah, I own like all of his books. Like everything except for like his most recent one, I'm pretty sure I own.
And he's a very huge fan of it. So much so that he even named his YouTube channel inspired by Haruki Murakami.
Yeah.
So would you mind explaining that?
So Matt, Colorless Wonderland is really, it means...
Who is wrong and who is right? Yellow, brown, black or white? The spaceman he answered, you're no longer mind. I've opened your eyes, you're now colorblind. Racial.
So that's a very interesting description.
Yeah, absolutely,
very,
yeah.
Very well informed.
Yeah, I'm very talented in the guitar.
So you've read Norwegian Wood 3 times now.
Yes.
At this point.
Yep.
Would you mind giving us a little idea of what the book is about for anyone who isn't familiar with it?
So, if you guys are familiar with Haruki Murakami's style at all, he's basically one of the main purveyors of like contemporary magical realism, at least in like the 21st century, and at least recently. But Norwegian Wood is probably his most realist munovel. There's no elements of magical realism. There's some kind of odder elements, which I imagine we'll get to in detail later. But Norwegian Wood is really about the main character, Toru Watanabe, and his relationship with Naoko, I believe is how you pronounce it. And Naoko is the girlfriend of his dead best friend. I don't think that's a spoiler. And it really just kind of journeys his time as a young adult in college through basically 18 to 20, as he kind of navigates this relationship, the relationship with other girls, the relationship with really the world around him, and his own kind of introspection. There isn't like a massive driving narrative.
No.
It's really just the character just encounters new things within these relationships and how to navigate them and how those relationships affect him. And then the novel kind of ends.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good wrap up of the book. Yeah, because nothing really happens. But this is a book that apparently like everyone in Japan has read.
It's what blew him into like stardom.
Yeah, he was like, that's what got him into like the West basically. And for my general opinions on the book is that I liked parts of it, and I despised a lot of other parts of it.
Yeah.
Where would you rank this, like, in your Murakami collection?
It's a fascinating thing, because I love about 80% of this book.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately love it, and I struggle with about 20% of it.
Yeah.
In the Murakami canon, it's up there. Because I think it's one of his attempts to really, like, actually... Because this was a book, if you read any interviews from him, was a challenge. It's basically because people thought, like, oh, he couldn't write this style. And so he's like, I'm going to write this style, and then wrote a realist, like, romance story. Yeah. Because he's been so kind of odd with his, like, inclusions of, like, sheep and weird, like, magical realism elements. This one's definitely in the upper tier. I have problems with it. I have problems with all of his novels. I want to clarify that. I don't think any of his novels are perfect.
Yeah.
But this one's definitely one of the better ones, I'd say.
But you would say he's, like, your favorite author?
He's up there, yeah.
Up there.
He's my favorite author because I constantly find myself challenging his work.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting relationship to have, is I don't love any of his books.
Yeah.
But it constantly drives me back to see why I don't love any of them.
So I think the more interesting conversation is things that we don't like. So let's start with things that we do like about the book.
Okay.
I liked Watanabe for about half the book.
Okay. What half are we talking about? Because there's two halves of it.
The first half.
Okay,
He was tolerable in the first half. I think Murakami's prose is definitely very, very good.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about. This is your first time reading his works. What do you think about him as a writer?
I think that he has a lot of strengths in descriptions, and I think that there are moments of brilliance in how he like dissects humans and our social interactions. Mm-hmm. There are some great description moments of like characters or settings and stuff, and there's some good visual storytelling that I appreciate.
Yeah.
And then there's always like tricky things with the prose because it's translated.
Yeah.
Murakami speaks English, right? Did he translate?
Okay, so this is the interesting thing, is this book is a translated work. At least the copy I have, I'm pretty sure was translated by J. Rubin. But the thing is, like, he's pretty open. He writes, I believe, in a mixture of both English and Japanese. But he's been on record saying he reads his English, and he thinks the English translations of his work capture what he's trying to write better. Yeah. He's fluent. His first language is Japanese, but he writes in English, and he's again, pretty open the fact that he thinks his English translations of the books are the better versions of it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't. Yeah, that's usually the opposite.
You would think so, but he says it's like it captures what I'm trying to say better than in Japanese, and I think that's pretty interesting.
So, I mean, I think the biggest strength of this book for me is the theme of happiness or lack thereof. Yeah. I was most captivated in this book. Full spoilers, by the way. I mean, you're probably watching this because you've read. It's
one of the most popular books of the modern century.
But the character of Hatsumi, the girlfriend of the Great Gatsby guy.
Yeah, Nagasawa. Yeah, yes. Nagasawa's girlfriend. Yeah.
Yes, her character was utterly tragic for me.
Yeah.
And the fact that Watanabe at one point says, like, you know, you're a great personality. You should be happy.
Yeah.
And like you see her character, and you know she's very welcoming. She's very warm, very friendly.
Yeah.
And you think she'd be happy, but she's not. She hates being with Watanabe. I mean, not what's
Nagasawa.
Nagasawa.
Yeah.
But she's still with him for some reason.
Yeah.
And then eventually she kills herself because she eventually breaks up with them, marries, but then it's obviously she's unhappy with what's going on and you know, cuts and slits her wrist. Yeah,
there's definitely this element of internal happiness. Murakami's novels all this is all taken from his interviews and just everything I've read. He's someone who his stories are always about searching or finding something. Yeah. And this one, it's about happiness or kind of like this self identity.
Yeah.
And you're right, Hatsumi's character is fascinating because she's in 30 pages of the book, not even. And her story and her relationship with Nagasawa, who we should probably clarify, Nagasawa is described as being brilliant, but so in his own identity and what he calls like rhetoric and basically way of systems is what he says, that he can't process assisting anyone else.
He's borderline psychopathic with his inability to feel empathy for people.
But he has these moments of like empathy and stuff like that, and that's what makes him such a fascinating character. I love Nagasawa more in a reread, which is really fascinating.
He recognizes that he's bad for Hatsumi, but he's also not really going out of the way to break the two of them up.
No, because he's so he even talks about it, he's like, I was up front from the beginning. She knows who I am. I don't hide it, and you have to respect that a little bit. In a book of characters who are constantly searching for their own self of identity, he stands out the most as being the most cemented, but his identity is so terrible. But yeah, he's Hatsumi's character, because Murakami has this tendency to just kind of end people, not just like their lives, but like their stories, and a lot in like 3 or 4 characters in this novel just next page die. With you get a line of like, and that was the last time I ever saw her before she killed herself, and you're just like, whoa. It's pretty fascinating.
But the thing about Hatsumi is like, you know, she kills herself, and then they go to play pool. So that scene is even more tragic because you get to know her character more. And out of all the female characters in this book, I consistently liked her the most. Probably because she has the least amount of
talking. Oh, God. We'll explain that in a second.
That sounds wrong when I said it out loud, but we'll get more into that later on. But then that theme is sort of in other characters. Like Reiko is a very talented musician, but you know she's in a mental institute. It's not an institute, but it's like a community.
We have to talk about Reiko.
Yeah, we'll talk about Reiko in a little bit. But like characters that should be happy but are not, and it's this curious element of it. Is it just like pure coincidence that they're not happy, or is it like them leaning to their own self-destruction? Because Hatsumi could leave Nagasawa,
but she says she can't.
But she can't. And you know she could even end up with like Watanabe or somebody nicer, but she doesn't. So and then eventually leads on to her killing herself. So that stuff really, I thought, was really well done. And very subtle in a way too. It wasn't like hitting you over the head with the message.
There's that really great line at the end when he sees her for the last time, but you know she's killed herself. Where he's like, I got that last shot of her picking up the receiver, and that was the last time I ever saw. And there's this. Murakami has this really excellent sense of finality. Not at the end of his books, which we'll talk about, but I'll explain that in a second why he has that. But in the middle of his books, he's really excellent at just pinpointing when to create a final moment for a character relationship. And it just seems to like, you get that melancholic feeling, which is why I just find myself always coming back to him, because you don't often see a lot of authors taking that, like, here's a character who I clearly respect. Hatsumi has a lot of self-agency, even with the own kind of like self-destruction identity thing we're talking about. The willingness to just go, and that character's gone forever. That's just life. Is a very respectable thing to go for here.
Yeah, I would say so. And then for other like prose, would you have any other things that you want to add, things that you liked about
Murakami? To me is always I always go back to him and gravitate to him because of the fluidity of his prose and his writing. He's always someone to me that has been able to capture just like fluid writing. That's the only way I know how to put it, because I don't know if you felt this, but your eyes just kind of naturally like flow throughout the page, and that's something that's really hard to do because he does pack in. It's not difficult. This book
No.
is not a hard book to read.
No.
But there's still a lot going on. In the descriptions, often, if you just kind of glance over them, you can kind of miss what's going on. I missed a lot the first time I read it, and I missed a lot the second time I read it. And I'm finally starting to pick up a lot on the third time. But he's just got one of those natural abilities to write language and to translate it. And that might be the translation, but I don't think so. I think that's just his ability to write stories and tell descriptions and the focus on that.
Yeah. All right, so this next character is a bit of pro and con for me.
Okay.
And that is Midori. What do you think about Midori?
I love Midori's character.
You love Midori's character.
Okay. My journey of these 3 reads have been fascinating. The first time I read it, I was like, what the fuck was this? I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
I couldn't pinpoint it. The second time I read it, and I read it in a day. Like, I legitimately had 8 hours to kill, and I just sat and read this entire book. And I dug it, like, a lot more. And this one, I found Midori's character to be the most fascinating. Not only in a reflection of, I'm presuming, is like Japanese culture during the 1960s when this was set, but also just in terms of how she stands out in contrast to Watanabe's character, because I actually had a big flip on Watanabe's character. His lack of responses got really frustrating for me. But we'll get to that in just a second. But Midori's character and the constant flipping and the lots of like ways she shields herself and protects herself from like criticism, but also like the impact of the outside world. You find out when she's like, my dad went to Uruguay. Yeah. And then she's like, no, I lied. He's like dying in a hospital. And you're like, that's a really great like, not twist, but like reveal that gives a lot about her character.
Yeah. In the apartment scene too, where she wants to stay in the apartment and it's burning. It's like. It's like she's suicidal. Like, you know that she's somewhat suicidal without being. She's suicidal.
Yep, it's like she wants to. Yeah, that's how deep she is right now. I'm a sucker for romance, so at the end when they're kind of like coming together, I was like, this is really awesome. Yeah. I'm a sucker for that. But I don't know. I found her character to be in a story of people that feel so dark and like depressed, but not in like a bad way. Her character would be like a very nice like combination of still attempting to find peace in the world and happiness while also recognizing like the machinations of her own like not destruction but like sadness. I thought was a really, really nice contrast. And I honestly on a third reread, she's probably my favorite part about this entire book was her character.
Because I found her to be incredibly annoying at times.
Damn it.
Incredibly annoying. I like her character.
Is that the point? Is that the point though? Because you're viewing everything from Watanabe's perspective.
But it has to do with Watanabe as well.
Okay.
So she's both incredibly deep but also like the one-dimensional, like sexually charged, promiscuous girl.
That's the issue with Murakami's female characters, which we'll talk about. I feel like later.
And there's just times where she's like, "Oh, I just took my clothes off in front of my dad's funeral picture and I showed her all my female parts because I could." I'm like, shut the fuck up.
I kind of dug that like a little.
Really, I don't know. Maybe I just was going in with a negative attitude towards. And then she's like so fascinated with Watanabe's masturbation life. Yeah. I'm like, oh my god, there's just pages of it.
There's a reason for that. And she even says, she's like, I grew up in an all-girls school and my boyfriend doesn't like to talk about it.
Yeah, but it's still so annoying.
It's okay.
It's just, but then it's not helped by because I just see Murakami like writing that character too. Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, shut up, Murakami.
That's the issue.
And then like Watanabe, like there's like I'm gonna say something very vulgar for a second just because it's like literally what's said in the book. It's like there's a scene where she's like, I want you to masturbate and imagine yourself like coming on me. Yeah. And then Watanabe has like these like sitcom moments where he looks at the camera and goes, oh boy. Yeah. And you imagine like a laugh track playing in the background. Yeah. That happens several times, and it's like Watanabe's character is very frustrating as well. Maybe if there was a character who was more like Midori, like the scenes would come off as more like cute or whatever. Yeah. But like I just see Murakami like being like, whoa, she's a crazy woman. That's
the thing. Murakami is not the Murakami's got a lot of. I just made a video about it.
Tyler made a video about it.
Is Haruki Murakami a sexist author or not? And yeah, there's definitely a lot there. Probably way too much to even tackle in this one video. But Midori's combination of her promiscuity, like overt sexualness, and then like resignation that the world is like really shitty, I found to be like fascinating. I do think Murakami's treatment and a lot of observations about sex is like problematic at a certain point, especially when we start to consider that this is entirely from the male gaze, and this is a movie written for. It really feels like a movie written for a book.
This is like male gaze at its like it's like I feel like sometimes male gaze is like. It's like you can't prevent it when a guy is making a book or directing a movie, but this is like the gratuitous version.
This is absolutely this is and this is also something I know we're jumping around a lot, but this is also something. This is a movie written for guys, a book written for guys, and I really struggle with that because it really contains like some of his best female characters, which sounds really bad when we're kind of criticizing.
So I like parts of Midori's character. There's some scenes with her that are my favorite scenes in the book. But
do you have any arts like specifically
the apartment scene, which I mentioned, and then like the going to see the father. When she's it's actually like dying. Things like that.
When she kind of like he's like, hey, just like go, I'll take care of him. Yeah. No, it's like it's fascinating because a lot of these female characters lack this clear like autonomy and like acceptance away from society. And, like, this kind of, like, I'm not going to deal with, like, society's, like, not, like, gender roles, but, like, expectations. And it really struggles because then you read this and you're just like, this feels like male fantasy. Like, a lot of the times. And the treatment and over-sexualization, which I want to get to Reiko. Because I have a lot of fucking problems with Reiko's character.
So you can introduce the Reiko.
Do you have any final points? We'll probably end up jumping back to
the I mean, I've said my piece with Midori for the most part. If we want to criticize more Watanabe, we'll probably be...
We're going to get to that, I feel like. I just want one more final point on Midori. I really just dug she's a fascinating character to me, and her connection with Watanabe is mixed. I say I have a lot of pros and cons because I understand why she likes him, but also am like, you're such a boring fucking dude. Like, what are you doing?
Because it's like comical. Like you don't understand why anyone is so attracted to Watanabe.
Yeah, it's just like why is
they're all so obsessed with his penis and his masturbation life. Every single female character is. It's like ridiculous.
It gets a lot.
Yeah. He's like, oh man. Whoa!
Yeah, so...
and then you hear the 90s laugh track from the background.
It's like, another situation I'm in. Uh-oh, brr! And you get the slide whistle sound effect in there.
We're going to a hardcore porno movie because Midori is just that kind of girl.
And I'm bored.
And I'm bored. Hey, that's the only reason why I'm hanging out with her.
I'm just bored out of my mind. He even has a few times where he's like, I didn't even feel like calling her. And you're like, what?
I didn't tell her I was moving away.
I completely forgot.
I guess she was mad about it.
And he gets depressed about it, and you're like, man, you dick. But that's a self-destruction kind of element, which we talked about. Reiko's character, I love 20% of her character.
I like a little more than that.
I like
Let's talk about the 20% first.
One of the more interesting written female characters he has. Someone who is ripe with potential for conspiracy theories and stuff like that. In terms of relationship, we haven't gotten to Naoko yet. I know. With Reiko and who she is and her impact, along with her backstory about who she is. Reiko is someone. So Naoko has dealing with severe like mental trauma and mental health issues, and she goes away to kind of this like sanatorium, retreat camp, where it's basically the idea is like you're not a patient. It's a community of people helping each other, which is actually like a very nice like idea. Like honestly. But
maybe
now,
you should go there sometime.
Maybe I should. I'm after this book, after how many times I've read Murakami, it's gotten a little concerning. Reiko is Naoko's roommate. Reiko is in her late 30s. Has a fascinating backstory, which I imagine we'll talk about. But she serves as the older Midori character when Midori's not in the novel. Because there's a point where the novel could not survive if it was just Watanabe and Naoko, because they would just
sit in a room and stare at each other.
They just sit in a room and stare at each other. And it does feel like a point where they need these buffer characters. Reiko has moments of some of my favorite parts of the entire book. And then I despise a large portion of her character, which is fascinating because she has one of the better endings for a female character in any of his stories, where she gains kind of like self-confidence and autonomy within the world and then sets out to create her own path while not overcoming but addressing and accepting her mental health issues, which is like a very great thing to do, and that's part of the 20%. And maybe the 80% is like, what could she, like, how much of her backstory is real? Like, what is her relationship with Naoko? What did you like or not like about her character?
I liked some of her backstory. I liked how she was, a positive figure in Naoko's life.
Yep.
But first of all, her backstory goes on for like 20 fucking pages. And I'm just like, shut up. Like, it just keeps going. It's like I understand that it's good. Like, no one talks for that long, you know? You're like watching it and you're like, oh, I'm reading a book right now, because no one would talk for that long. And I didn't like how they had sex at the end.
I have a lot of problems with that. Now. On the third... I sent you a Snapchat where I was like, I fucking hate the ending of this book. I really do. Reiko's character, there's a lot of I read a lot of theories online that she is not who she says she is.
Okay.
Because we don't really she's in a mental sanatorium kind of community.
But she seems like she's pretty with it.
And that seems to be, there's a lot of evil Reiko conspiracy theories that's on Reddit.
Is there a theory that she killed Naoko or
she
something?
Helped us she's the person who's always in her ear, and she wanted Watanabe. I mean, that kind of leads to the sex at the end.
Oh.
Which it's a theory. There's no evidence for it, and I couldn't find Murakami ever addressing it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you just read it. And Reiko's character is basically Midori, but with more mental health issues, is legitimately how it is.
Yeah.
She's quirky. She says a lot of things, overt sexual things. She's kind of that older, wiser character who assists Watanabe in his relationship with Midori.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they come together and they have sex a bunch. And then she leaves, and you're like, what?
Because Watanabe is just such a lady killer. Because he's just like Haruki Murakami.
So I tried to actually find some justification for why they have sex, and I guess the idea is they're just two not broken individuals, but they find this moment of genuine connection. And they jump on it, but in the larger context of the story, it's the shittiest thing they've done.
Yeah, especially because of they both are well aware of the relationship with Naoko and stuff. It just comes out of nowhere.
It comes out of nowhere, and then you have this constantly looming thing of Midori and Watanabe's relationship, and you're like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
It's a large, complicated thing. What did you think about any of the times he goes to the sanatorium, the sanctum?
They were good, but they kind of went on for too long.
They're 40 pages.
Yeah. As I said, I feel like her backstory goes on for too long. And I liked her relationship as the buffer between Naoko and Watanabe, the one who makes them actually do things.
Yeah.
And not just sit around.
Yeah.
But she's a fine character. I had a very bad taste in my mouth with how the book ended with her and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's we're gonna talk about 13-year-olds.
Oh my god, that's right. So okay, so do you want me to take it away?
Yeah.
Okay, so I made a 35-minute video on his Haruki Murakami sexist author, and the catalyst for that was I was rereading this book for this video, and I was also at the same time reading his memoir collection, what I talk about when I talk about running, and I had also just finished rereading Colorsuke Tazaki. I was going to do a video on this, but I don't think I could do it justice, or not do it justice, but just not interested in it enough. And there is a scene in this book where Reiko is the victim of a 13-year-old girl. And I understand the point. I got on my video a comment saying, if it bothered you, that was the point. And I went, no, it didn't bother me because it was uncomfortable. It bothered me because Murakami sexualized a 13-year-old girl to the utmost degree.
Yeah.
I have a lot of issues with Murakami's treatment of younger female characters. Maybe not his overall, treatment of female characters as a whole, but just the underage sexualization of young characters. There is no reason why this character has to be 13.
Yeah.
I tried to come up with some reasons about, Reiko is still chasing that, youthful kind of, element, and she sees this kind of, youthful presence in it. And one of the comments was well, she manipulated Reiko. And I'm like, well, there's still the argument that the girl's 13.
Yeah.
She's, it's one of those things where it's just, we're viewing things from an American sociocultural perspective.
Yeah, it should be noted that the age of consent in Japan is 13.
Is it really?
I looked it up, and they got back into my door 5 minutes later. But,
Why have you just bought plane tickets to Japan?
I was reading this book.
I was reading the book. I had to figure out what was going on. No, I swear, it's in this book. Look, you know what this is. Check out my channel, please.
Yeah. But
is it really 13? That's so low.
Yeah. So there's that to consider.
But the thing is, though,
the idea of a 13-year-old seducing a woman in her at this point she's in her early 30s.
Exactly.
It's just so it's comical, and you don't. It's disgusting and it's comical because you just don't. Why?
And there's the wonderful okay, again, I gotta be vulgar for a second, but it's literally what happened is Reiko is there's a lot of openness about being wet during sex and sexual arousal, and Reiko is just I was never more my husband never, and you're just you're whoa, what? And this then leads into the question of is Reiko an unreliable narrator? What's her? But it's one of those things regardless of whether or not it's true or not, Murakami has legitimately 15 pages of the book that are dedicated to sexualizing this 13-year-old girl.
And it'd be so the whole idea is it's some sort of lesbian awakening for Reiko, because she said she can't stop at first because she's so overwhelmed.
Yep.
You can do the scene you can have the girl kiss Reiko.
Yeah.
And like this like it like triggers something in her and she like paralyzes this for a moment, but then she stops it. Like you don't literally need to have the 13-year-old going down on her in order for her to
like,
this is a bad idea.
Yeah, like graphic, like it says like and she started using your tongue and I couldn't and you're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And like I understand Reiko is technically a victim in this.
Yeah.
I mean it's described as that. Murakami definitely frames it like this, but there's just an inherent like visceral disgust I get, not from the fact that the book had the impact that one person who commented, but the fact that like it's I don't want this entire video is dedicated a little bit, but like the fact that like I don't enjoy having 13-year-old girl characters sexualized. Okay, in 1284 it's sort of about like a cult, and that like cult there are like children like sexualized and having sex, and but there's not justification, but there's an element to it where you're like it's a dark cult.
Yeah.
Like a weird thing going on. There's a reason why the content's more graphic because you understand it's a cult. This one is not that. This is a realist novel. Murakami has no magical real elements. He has a few surreal dream stuff still.
And like at the end it like kind of has some stuff.
Kind of. But this is a real story. Not like actually. This is not autobiographical. He's like my life is far more boring than this book.
Oh, okay.
He's like this is not what happened.
She doesn't need to be 13, and she doesn't need to go as far. She doesn't need to go as far as sexualizing the moment in her as Murakami does. That's the point we're trying to make.
Yeah, exactly. And I really, you were like a couple hundred pages ahead of me.
Yeah.
And you're like, Jesus. Like, we're on a hike, and you're like, I just got to that backstory. What the fuck? And I'm like, I know.
I didn't even know it was coming either.
Well, on your first read through, what'd you like?
I was just I felt like I was reading a book.
Yeah.
I was taken out of it because I'm like, there's no way this would ever happen. You know?
Yeah.
Unless Reiko's a pedophile, then I don't find her to be a sympathetic character.
Yeah, and that's the issue, and that leads to a lot of like the evil Reiko theories of just like, well, what is her relationship? And you're like, yeah, and then she like ultimately ends up like standing out as like a character who's just like. It's like one of the things like you're the spot in this book that I'm like I see so much potential, and that's how I probably felt like similar to you, where I'm like I see so much opportunity in this character. Yeah, and then it does feel a little squandered.
And it's made worse because it'd be one thing you can do the gratuitous scene, but have Watanabe like react to it.
Yeah, he's just kind
of
like
okay.
I think he says he's like I didn't know how to respond. You're like man, you just showed like a little more emotion in that one.
You know, like the characters who are hearing the story aren't even like pointing out the weirdness of it either. So that makes it doubly worse.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk about Watanabe's character? Because we're kind of we can
we can split Watanabe and Naoko or something.
Okay.
Because I don't have too much to say about Naoko.
Then we got to focus on Watanabe. Yeah. The main character of the story is called Toru Watanabe, who has for the first half of the book is very interesting. Yeah. Because he's very open about the impact of the death of his friend Kizuku. At the start, and you're like, that's pretty like a vulnerable character. Like you have to respect it. Murakami's tackling a lot of like big things here, but there's a point where you're like 180 pages into the book, and you're like, I don't think you've said more than one sentence as a response, and you're like, I'm so frustrated reading your character, not for a lack of response, but for lack of passiveness. What do you think about Watanabe's character?
He's like white toast. He's just he's just there, and that works in certain regards, but like you have like the character of Nick and like Ray Gatsby or whatever, and the character's not particularly interesting, but there's something to him, and he has some sort of like engagement with the plot, but like the characters around him are also interesting in the setting. And like there are characters that are interesting as like we've talked about these characters for a long time, so the characters have depth to them, but his I said again, he's like the 90s sitcom punchline character where he just like, oh boy, and like these characters are spilling their hearts out to him, and he's just kind of like whatever. I mean, you get some of his emotion, more of a more vulnerable side after Naoko commits suicide and he goes traveling and stuff like that, but there are just times where he's just so frustrating to listen to. You just want to like push him to do
do something.
Because and then when he's like, and then when the most frustrating aspect was when he goes on this trip after Midori says she loves him and like are gonna get into a relationship, and he goes on a trip and she's like, just tell me what's going on. And he goes, I can't tell you. I'm like, why?
It's a lot.
It's so utterly again we're talking about we were talking earlier about like people like kind of like making it themselves unhappy. But it's just so. It's utterly selfish to just not say what you're doing. Like he knows to a certain extent that you had another relationship. She would know what's going on. She would understand. She's bled her heart out to you, and you can't do the same. It's so annoying.
I want to beat the comments real quick. it did not have the impact it wanted on us. We're not sitting here frustrated because I understand the readers will to be like, why are you doing this, Watanabe?
Yeah.
This idea of self-destruction. There's a difference between recognizing that self-destruction and having actual criticisms with the character. If he was a better, more defined character, maybe with just a little more personality, then that ending would be like, it would have gotten like the visceral
yeah.
like reaction to one out of us. We're just sitting here like frustrated. But the issue is Watanabe's character, and this is where Murakami's weakness as a writer comes out, is how he, like, his main characters. His main characters are reflections of him. Murakami is not a very interesting person. He's very ordinary. He's very, like, recluse. He doesn't really do a lot of stuff. He's just kind of like, I'm passive. And the issue with this story is when you have a lot of interesting characters happening around it, it's kind of like the Django Unchained effect.
Yeah.
Where everyone else, you even mentioned
everyone
Nick,
other than Django is like a fascinating character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but you can't, it does not work in a book form.
Yeah.
Because you have 380 pages and we're spending 12 hours reading this book. You just can't have a character be this passive. I understand that the role of female characters in Murakami's novels is they're often like the modifiers for male characters. They're often what pushes them into the narrative. And really the female characters are the propelling force of the narrative itself. Murakami does not like having not passive, active male characters. Yeah. They often just are languid and just relaxed, and they don't really do anything. They kind of introspect more. His male characters are very internal. His female characters are very external. Yeah. We get that a lot in this book, and that's a lot of the criticisms I see with his female characters, is that they often just serve as like either sexual objects or ways for the male characters to kind of introspect and grow from. They're often like an object of desire or a destination or a goal. Murakami writes books about something missing or searching or finding something. And the character is trying to find that. But the thing is, though, it's not, he doesn't feel like a character at a certain point.
Yeah. And, like, we're not like these people, like, I hate, like, especially in film discourse on YouTube, where there are just so many channels that are just based around nitpicking, like, character logic. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't expect our characters to act 100% logically all the time.
No.
But it's just so, in this case, it's so infuriating where he's clearly acting so selfishly and so, like, he just comes off like he's stupid.
Yeah, that's the issue.
And that's the issue. And especially because Midori, like, you know, you go through this plot where he's starting to come to accept that he has to move on from Naoko and move on, and you know go to Midori, and you know Midori is also kind of mentally unstable in a way as well with her backstory.
Yeah.
And you know, like finally like open up to each other, and it's just so infuriating for him to not just say what's going on.
Yeah, and that's ultimately like, it's one of those things of like, yeah, at times it probably had the desired effect. Like at that end when we're frustrated with him, that's probably what Murakami's going for. But it's just there's a certain point when you're like 6 pages into a long conversation and it's just one person talking the entire time and he's like, oh, I agree.
Yeah.
It gets really not uninteresting to read. And it does ruin a lot of the like buying of relationship between Midori and Watanabe, which is like a big focal center point. Also, it kind of like, there's points where it dampens the relationship between Watanabe and Naoko. Yeah. We understand that they're joined more through this kind of like shared trauma. But even through shared trauma, you have to have some kind of connection. Yeah. Gotta have something. And I think this novel lacks that a lot. And that's where like this 20%, 25% of me struggling with this book comes from, is the character of Watanabe, who I really just struggled with on the third read through. Yeah.
And then I feel like the last page too is like kind of like try hard abstract, where he's
where am I? Who am I?
Yeah, what am I? What is this world? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. Like, they kind of set up at the beginning where he's reflecting and he feels like his memories are fading. Yeah. But the last page is just like, what's going on? It's just reality. And then ends. And you're like...
So that's the thing, and this is where Murakami... this is where I struggle with the ending a lot. And I really don't like the ending, because Murakami he said in an interview that he does not like writing happy endings. Yeah. Because he does not find it interesting. He doesn't find that, like, nice little bow to be like a nice way to end the novel. But the issue is, you can't do that in the final paragraph. You have to have a build-up. The novel, you get this moment of like reprieve at the end, where he like calls Midori and he's like, I'm making a growth. Yeah. And that final, I wonder how many lines it is, like legitimately, I can find it real quick. He has that final point where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 lines. Yeah. Where he's like, where am I? Where's my life? And you're like, man, I need like 5 more pages of you like realizing like my journey is not over.
Yeah, you can make them not be together at the end and have a bad ending, but also do it in like a more satisfying way.
Yeah, that cycle of self-destruction is so purveying. And
sorry everyone, but the video cut out because Tyler heard from his pimp. Called.
Yeah, he called and then all of a sudden I got a notification. It's like, hey, you missed your call. Where are you? Damn it.
Yeah, so he's late for his shift right now. Yep. But make sure to check out all of our other content. Tyler, you have some good videos on Haruki Murakami as well.
Yep, I have a 35-minute video on his Haruki Murakami, a sexist author or not, and then I have a bunch of other just like nonsense videos that I copied from you guys.
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Mostly Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I have, saying that I'm not dead by this point, I have 2 more videos recently that came out. I have a 6-month wrap-up of all the books I read, and I have a hot take on Crime and Punishment, and to totally devalue any of my viewpoints on any of my views on books, because I had problems with a classic immortal book. Yes.
Oh god,
exactly.
We just had a problem with this classic, and now you're gonna have a problem with that classic.
So we're gonna get some heat. And if you want to see more videos like this, I might leave that audio or talk about Murakami's other book we're gonna talk about.
Yep.
In case you guys want to see more videos like this, so make sure you let us know with comments and likes, subscriptions.
Yeah, you'll have fun editing all that.
All that stuff. Yeah, it'll be great. I cannot wait for all of that to happen. So thank you so much. Also check out my Instagram as well. New Instagram, I'll link it in the description below. And yeah, check out Tyler's channel, Colorless Penis.
It has a color. It's alive. It's still there.
It's void of pigment. That's like the only part of your body that has no pigment.
It's just pure white.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. All right, thank you, made it this far, and goodbye.